Good evening and welcome to Crime Corner on OmniDog's Vault, also known as Bobby Bonilla Day. Somebody's already in the chat. Jesse, say what in the chat? Well, wishing me a happy Bobby Bonilla Day, and we can get into that. Certainly, it's a fascinating
Is that a baseball player?
New York Mets history.
I'm guessing that's a baseball player.
Yeah.
Sounds like a baseball player's name.
Yeah, he started in Pittsburgh, your town, Taylor.
Oh, well, I still wouldn't know anything about him. I know like Mario Lemieux and people like that. Roberto Clemente, but that's pretty much it.
Well, it's Crime Corner, and this is the long-awaited discussion on Bendis and Brubaker's Daredevil, an omnibus format. With me is, of course, my co-host Taylor Brown, and our Daredevil guest is Tim Burnham. How's it going, Tim?
Not bad. How are you guys?
Good. This has been, we were supposed to do it at the end of March, and it's now July 1st. So something happened.
What you're saying is I probably shouldn't mention when you guys first mentioned this to me.
When did we first mention it to you?
It was I think it was between Christmas and New Year's is when you first mentioned it. And then the original plan I think that was floated to me was sometime end of January, and then that really quickly got pushed to March for just a number of things. And then the world did what it did, and
yeah,
who knows? So
just blame the pandemic whenever things don't go according to plan.
That's
right.
All you gotta
do. I think it's pretty much a globally acceptable excuse at this point. So
yeah, exactly. So we have the issue is I had never read these particular books, and everybody was telling me how great they were. So I got, and I'd had them forever, like everything. I've had them forever and never read them. And so this was a good excuse for me to read these books and get to know them. And then, and I think Taylor proposed this be a Crime Corner, and we roped Tim into it. And we're finally here. We can finally talk about
7 months later
Brubaker runs.
Well, before we dive into our review, I mean, before we dive into our review, I'm a pretty big Daredevil fan. My dog's name is Murdoch, so obviously he's one of my favorite characters, but Tim is like miles beyond me in terms of his Daredevil knowledge and fandom. So Tim, why don't you tell us a little bit about why you're so into Daredevil and maybe some of the cool pieces that you have in your collection?
So both proud and ashamed, I guess, of how the character kind of got in my purview. I came to comics way late. Like I was a baseball kid growing up, just mentioned the Bobby Bonilla Day and his whole contract that's still paying him, even though he's been retired for 20 years now. So that's great for him and all, and not to get sidetracked, but I was a baseball kid growing up. So I didn't get into comics until after college. And actually and at that point in time, it was even just like Transformers, just kind of stuff that went, made me nostalgic for the days of my youth. Then the Affleck Daredevil movie came out, and went and saw it sometime, the first couple weeks it was out with some friends. Really enjoyed it. So then I was like, okay, so this is an interesting character. Where do I go next? And at the time, the first place that I found that seemed to be a good starting point was the Kevin Smith Joe Quesada relaunch. So I started with that. I read the first trade, loved it. And then a good buddy of mine here in town said, oh, hey, you like Daredevil. Let me introduce you to a gentleman by the name of Frank Miller. And that was all downhill from there. Like as soon as I read, his stuff, and then Born Again that came a little bit later, it was all downhill. And then I was just full on everything Daredevil that I could get my hands on. At the time, there was just a handful of various trade paperbacks. There was like one random collection from like the middle of the Nocenti run, and a couple others floating around. If it was Miller or Smith, you could get your hands on it pretty easily. The rest of the stuff was kind of hit and miss. But then the movie was out around the time, that Bendis had been getting into his run. So then I got into that, and I started picking up Daredevil on a monthly basis. Issue 51, which oddly enough barely had Daredevil in it at all.
We had the same origin story. I loved that movie. I was 12 years old or 13 years old when it came out, and I thought it was fantastic. I read Man Without Fear after that by Frank Miller and John Romita. Then I grew up, and I was like, oh, wait, this movie's not good. But oh, well.
Yeah. So the movie still has a soft spot in my heart because it's kind of what drew me to the character. But looking back, it's not very good. And really the best parts about it are all the like super inside baseball, so to speak, nerdy Easter eggs. They name drop like every possible decent, well-known Daredevil creator, up to that point. I mean, at that point, the Bendis run was only a few months, maybe a year in, and like he's name checked in the movie. It's just like they went all in on the ridiculousness, so much so that they even got Kevin Smith to be, the coroner. So,
right.
It doesn't hold up real well as a movie, but I mean,
But the DVD has really cool interviews with Stan Lee, Frank Miller, John Romita Jr., Bendis. So the DVD actually those videos are on YouTube. So look those up. You can see interviews with Bendis, Miller, the rest of them about Daredevil. That's probably the best part about the movie is the DVD
absolutely.
extras.
Yeah, the specials on the DVD are great. And if you get the director's cut, it's a little bit better, but it's still not a great movie.
I'm guessing Jess avoided that. Jess is a bloodhound sniffing out bad superhero movies and not watching them.
I never saw it. I wanted it to be good, but I didn't see Elektra either. Although I know T-Lar Blunt loves Elektra.
And I love bugging Tyler about that, but it's not really that good either.
It never made sense to me why Jennifer Garner, they gave her green eye contacts. It's like, oh, that makes you more Greek, I guess, with blonde highlights. I don't know. It was kind of some interesting decisions. But I see some Daredevil pieces behind you. You have a lot of original artwork and commissions, right?
A couple. Well, yeah. So the commissions are behind me. 4/5 of the commissions are behind me. There's actually one right here on this wall, which you can't see, and I'm knocking my table over. I'm up in the second room. My wife's downstairs watching TV, so I was trying to stay out of her way. But yeah, this is Marco Cacchetto. He's currently doing the art on Chip Zdarsky's run, and then behind me are two Mike Henderson pieces. He's the artist on Nailbiter Returns. He did a run 5-6 issues during the Charles Soule run, and then the one that you can't see is actually from this angle is probably my favorite. It's Chris Somney.
Oh, awesome! Jess still needs to read the Wade run soon.
I do.
I think that's going to be your favorite, Jess. If I had to guess, knowing you, I think the Wade run will be your favorite. And
I can skip Shadowlands and just go right to it.
For me, I never read Shadowlands, so yeah, but maybe Tim can give you some more guidance there. I kind of skipped it because I heard people hated it, so I never read it.
So without wasting too much time on it, I personally am kind of a proponent for Shadowland. It is nowhere near as good as the Bendis and Brubaker stuff that came before it, and it's nowhere near as good as the Wade stuff that came after it. However, if you take the Diggle material that was in the regular Daredevil book, the title, and the actual Shadowland arc, and the Daredevil Reborn miniseries that Diggle also wrote, that is all like a bridge between the end of Brubaker and the beginning of Wade. And it's actually pretty decent. Where Shadowland falls apart is when you get into all the tie-ins and other miniseries and stuff that they crammed into that omnibus. So
can I read just the main Shadowland story by itself? To
be perfectly honest, you probably could skip it. Me being the Daredevil fan that I am, kind of leans toward just kind of skip the not so good stuff. But
can I read just Shadowlands? I mean, is it? I have the Omni right there. Is it set up so that I?
Yes.
can just read Shadowlands and skip Titans?
You can start at the very beginning, read the Diggle stuff through the Shadowland series, then skip then they've got the miniseries, the tie-ins, like miniseries A 1 through 4, B 1 through 4. They've got them all together, and then they've got Daredevil Reborn at the end. So you can read up to the end of Shadowland, skip the other stuff, and then read Reborn, and you're perfectly fine. As far as like a reading order goes, it's probably one of the better put together, event omnibuy that's out there. I mean, it's not like Spider-Verse, which was an absolute cluster.
I get sticky notes and look up online to see what you need to read next.
Yeah. So, I mean, or alternatively, if you don't want to go through all that, I can give you a Cliff's Notes version off to the side sometime, not wasting time in this chat. But
you do have the omnibus, Jess, so I guess you could try it.
Yeah, I can check. Here, let me get it. So I know.
The question for Jess is the cellophane off yet?
What do you think?
No.
You would be correct.
On Saturday, he was opening the cellophane on one of these books, and I was making fun of him.
I saw that. I was late to the party Saturday, but I did see that.
Yeah, so there's all kind of Daredevil Reborn 1 through 4. Daredevil 501, Shadowland Elektra, Bullseye, Ghost Rider. I don't know. It doesn't bother me to read the whole thing and then go on to Wade's run. I don't. I mean, I'd be fine reading this as long as I can get to Wade's run. It doesn't. I don't.
So the best part about it, personally, like I said, the Diggle story is not bad. I think it gets a bad rap, and the art is wonderful. The main run was split between Roberto Del Toro and De La Torre and Marco Cacchetto, who's now on the Zdarsky run. His first stuff on Daredevil was during that Shadowland era, and then I think Billy Tan did the actual Shadowland event, and then Daredevil Reborn was drawn by
the Jock, or no, he did the covers.
No, Jock did the covers, which were awesome, but the artist was D. Giandomenico. I probably butchered that, but Carmine D. Giandomenico.
They talk a little bit about it at the beginning of Wade's run, but it's so minuscule, it doesn't really matter. There's like a scene with Captain America where it comes up, but you don't need to really have read Shadowland to really understand it. That's pretty much it.
As far as like the storyline goes, if you read, even if you just went to Wade, he gives you kind of the couple bullets that you really need to know. But it's, like I said, and I'm biased because Daredevil's my absolute favorite. So take my suggestion with a grain of salt.
Yeah,
I'm not gonna say you have to absolutely read it. Like, you could probably get by without it. But
just think on if you want to open the cellophane or not, Jess. Don't feel guilty if you want to keep it in there.
Okay, that's really the most critical part of any book is my taking the cellophane off.
It is.
I will tell you this: I would be very surprised if the Shadowland omnibus actually ever mattered if you still had cellophane on your book or not, should you decide to resell it.
Okay.
I don't anticipate that ever being a thing.
Okay.
Because even if it gets to where it's out of print, like, there's just not a demand for it because everybody says, "Oh yeah, that sucked." So, I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, I have a decision to make with that She-Hulk variant. Now that I see it's going for like $225 on eBay, and I spent $50 on it, but I do want to read it. So I'm thinking that maybe if IST gets in more of the A cover with her holding up the band while she's listening to the band while jogging, maybe I'll get that and sell the variant, but then I won't have the variant. So I don't know. Is that money worth that much to me?
Seems like a lot of work.
Yeah. I've already talked myself out of it, I think.
It's like a lot of work. And Jesse, say what? I think he's watching Omar's show on Near Mint Condition. Omar says hi. Jesse, recruit all the people on Omar's show to come over to watch this.
Tell Omar we said hi too.
Tell all the viewers over there to revolt and come watch Crime Corner.
No, don't tell them that.
What's that thing that they do on Twitch where like one group ends and they dump into another video?
I wouldn't know.
Watched it.
I've only seen it on actually oddly on some YouTube stuff, but like apparently there's this thing that like when there's a big viewing party done on Twitch, like that Twitch channel person can direct them all to another one. And so like you end up piggybacking shows and just these hordes like come in. I don't know.
IQ is a good point there, Jess. How long do you really look at the cover of a book though? Like for the variants and everything.
Well, that's a good point. I mean, it's right here because I have an incredible haul for the month of June. I'm going to make a video.
I've seen pictures of it, everyone. It's the most epic haul ever. If you think 2016 Jess was intense, pandemic Jess is even more intense.
This is stimulus check, Jess.
This is stimulus debit card, Jess.
Yeah. I don't know. That's a cool cover, and I just like having it. I understand what you're saying, and people say that all the time. But if you like the direct market variants, you like them because they have the interesting different cover. I'm not one of those people that says cover doesn't matter and because you're only going to see the spine and you only pull it out. I like knowing that I have the really cool cover. It's just a collector in me.
Yeah, I do too.
I mean, obviously the whole market made out of variants, so it makes sense.
Oh, and here's Bruce Johannes's review of Omar's show. Omar's Superman review. Matt. Okay, so everybody started watching the show then.
Well, he is reviewing Superman 4, which is horrible, so that makes sense.
Is that the Quest for Peace one?
Yeah. Whenever is that the one where he blows out the torch at the Olympics?
That's the one with the atomic, like the nuclear man.
He wants all the he gets rid of all the nuclear weapons.
Is 3 the one where he turns into like evil Superman or something and he blows out the torch at the Olympics?
Gosh, I don't remember.
The 3 and 4 were so bad; they're so interchangeable for me.
They were.
Was 3 the one with Richard Pryor?
Yeah, I remember the cover where he's flying with Richard Pryor. I remember one of those covers. I think it is 3 though.
Yeah, on the rooftop.
That's when it jumped the shark.
But we like Omar, so don't leave his show. Just come over once he's done if he finishes early.
Yeah.
But let's actually get into talking about a good book, which is I actually have the complete collections of Bendis and Brubaker. These guys have the omnibus. They're the real fans, I guess. So
well, I didn't get to tell how I discovered Daredevil.
Okay, Jess, why don't you talk about it?
I'll tell it real quick. It was in the late 90s at a little con. And at some guy had a long box of nothing but Daredevil singles that he sold for $50. So I said, well, that's a good way to get into Daredevil. I'll pick that up. Well, I let it sit, of course, being me. I let it sit for 20 years. And then I started going through it in 2016. Taylor, where'd you go? I started going through it in 2016, and I started pulling out things like the first Frank Miller and first Elektra and first Bullseye and Somebody Dies, and there was like all of these amazing Daredevil comics in it, and I ended up getting them all CGC'd, and they were all like 9.4 or better, and it all helped my healthcare, pay for my healthcare, which is happening right now. I'm using it to pay for my healthcare.
This is the only Daredevil single issue that I have.
I ended up with about 4 of those in the box.
That's one of the best single issues of Daredevil ever.
That's a great cover.
And they borrow from it heavily for in the movie, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
A lot of images taken right out of there, especially when Elektra is stabbed by Bullseye.
Yeah. There's like direct quotes.
Right. Unfortunately, it didn't work out as well as in the issue, but
no, they didn't.
They tried.
Yeah, so I really should read as much as I like Daredevil. That's why I want to read even more because I think he's my favorite Marvel character, and I just haven't read enough of him. I really like him, and when we interviewed Mark Waid about him, I said it's really not fair how much Daredevil gets dumped on. And Wade said, yeah, that's what's great about him. You can just keep dumping and dumping on him, and he keeps coming back for more. I mean, Wade had a gleeful smile when he was talking about how he was going to torture Daredevil.
The funny thing is, since you brought up Mr. Wade, everybody everywhere is like, oh yeah, he had like the lighthearted Daredevil run. there's some really dark stuff going on in his run, and
Right.
it's presented in a slightly more lighthearted lens, and it benefits from absolutely gorgeous art beginning to end, and the coloring is brighter. So it's presented in a way that says, hey, this is cheerful and happy, except there's some dark stuff going on.
And he said that too. I said that to him. I said, Mark, people think your run is lighthearted. I just read it. It's really not. It's just I think it's the Chris Somney art kind of downplays it to some degree.
But yeah, Somney and Rivera before him. I mean, and Rodriguez. I mean, it's all gorgeous, and it's the coloring is top notch too. But it's very bright.
We have to acknowledge the man in the chat with the cleanest walls in Cleveland. That would be Michael Cleveland, who swiffered his walls and now has extremely clean walls.
Yeah, Cycle, let us know. Did it really work out for you, swiffering your walls?
He left a note on one of our vids, and it said that it worked out really well.
We also have Blue G in here. I haven't seen him for a very long time. So it's good to see you, Blue G.
Oh, there's Blue G. How you doing, Blue? What up?
Well, Jess, you have a lot of great runs ahead of you. You have Wade, you have Soul, and I love Zdarsky's current run. I think his run's a classic in the making for sure.
Okay, good. So speaking of classic in the making, let's try and keep this not really long, but let's devote the time to it that it needs, and that is let's start with the Bendis run. Why is the Bendis run considered such a classic?
I can't move on until we read Cycle's current comments.
Oh,
they really are clean AF. I lay back on my couch and admired them for nearly 5 minutes.
And we had a hand in that. We helped him with that. We helped him with that.
Make you feel better than helping our viewers, Jess. That's all I want to do is help our viewers.
Daredevil's never give up attitude comes from his boxing roots. Okay, Felix, that's a good one.
Well, sorry for getting us off track. I had to read those comments.
Oh, that's fine. I don't care. Here's the one with the registration on his nose. There's the registration.
So that looks like it's got some cellophane on it. So did you had it, but you didn't read that one? Oh
no, it's got a broad art on it.
Got it. That's why it was shiny.
If you had read it by somehow keeping the cellophane on, I would have been impressed, Jess.
That's the magic of me.
I thought that he still had it sealed and that he maybe read it digitally or something. But
oh no, it was just a broad art cover. It's just a broad art cover.
Another way to get this run is also 3 thick trade paperbacks, which are also, I think, readily available on IST and Amazon and other websites as well. So another way to get it.
We're going to assume everybody knows who Daredevil is, what he went through, blah, 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 history up to Bendis. So what led up right to Bendis is Karen Page died after her life was torn to shreds. She died, and that leads right into the Bendis run. What is it that Bendis does in his 2 volumes that made it such a classic, in your opinion, and keep it under 30 minutes? Tim.
I know that was directed at me because I had all those notes previously. No, what the short version is, he basically outed Matt's secret identity to the public, which at the time hadn't really been done very often in comics. You could maybe come up with 1 or 2 characters here or there where they had kind of touched on it. As a matter of fact, I don't remember who the writer was, but there was like one other point, like 100 issues earlier in Daredevil, where they kind of toyed with the idea. They're like, oh, maybe we're going to let his secret identity out. And then they totally put it back in the jar, like within an issue or 2. So Bendis like really just kind of said, hey, Daredevil is Matt Murdock. The whole world knows. Now what happens? Okay.
And all the problems and issues that come with that.
Yeah.
And that was the one big revolutionary step that Bendis took, was outing Daredevil's secret identity.
I think it's also the mixture of the Alex Maleev art, which I we're going to talk about Brubaker's run a little bit. Michael Larson, one of my favorite artists, but I don't think you can beat that dynamic duo of Bendis and Maleev in that initial run that they did together. It's just such a crime noir epic that really ties back to movies from the 70s like Taxi Driver, Dog Day Afternoon, The Friends of Eddie Coyle, things like that. It's just such a down and dirty noir book that really, I think that's where Daredevil thrives the most.
Yeah.
Alex Maleev is just on another level with his photorealistic artwork and other ways he incorporates real life stuff into his artwork. It's just, you can't really beat it, in my opinion.
Psycho Cleveland, I would just caution you that any show that is billing itself about Daredevil is probably not the place to go to find out about derivatives trading. I don't think any of the three of us are familiar with derivatives trading, and we can talk about Daredevil, but I think you might be out of luck with derivatives here.
I think he's going too far. I think he thinks we know about everything since we helped him with the Swift ring problem. Sorry about that, Cycle. We don't know everything about everything.
Unfortunately, finance was not one of my better classes in college, so I'm of no help either.
Yeah, I mean, I can help you off air, but I don't know that we can help you.
Well, Jess, so Tim and I have read this run multiple times. This is your first read through. What were your initial impressions as you read it?
Well, I think one thing that struck me was how raw it was. It was really. I felt like they take Daredevil in this book, and I think they just make things so bad for him and show him so able to deal with it. I think what impressed me the most was his ability to deal with, I don't know. I mean, he's already lost Karen Page. Now his identity gets put out there. And he has no secrecy whatsoever, even though he continues to deny it. And then he's still got Kingpin to deal with. And I like the way it's told through the reporter.
Uric.
Yeah. I like the way it's told with Uric kind of telling a lot of it, especially in the beginning. And I really, this may be one of my favorite moments in comics, is when Daredevil kicks the crap out of Wilson Fisk and declares himself the Kingpin. To me, that is just one of the greatest moments in comics, I think, ever. And I just totally dug it. So, and I knew that that's when it was going to happen. I knew it happened in this volume, but I didn't know how it happened. I just knew that he eventually declared himself sort of the Kingpin, and it did not disappoint. It was really rocking. Here, let me highlight you, Taylor.
Yeah, and in this scene, they kind of go back and forth with art styles, which I wasn't a huge fan of. I get what they were going for, but I really just wish it stuck with the Alex Maleev art all the way through.
Yeah.
You know, Bendis has a tendency, and he's done this on a number of different runs, where he'll hit one of these key important or anniversary issues, and he'll bring in, kind of like a jam session of artists. And sometimes it worked great, sometimes it doesn't. This particular time, each artist getting basically one panel that was like half a page, that it just felt kind of ham-fisted, but the funny thing is it didn't detract from the situation at all. It was
great. That picture right there of just a beaten and whipped up on Wilson Fisk is amazing. That I just thought it was really amazing.
As much as I love that moment, my favorite moment of this entire book is when Matt just beats the crap out of Bullseye and says, "Who do you think you are? You're nothing. I can just destroy you at any moment." That's still my favorite moment in Daredevil ever.
Is that when he sits there with a stone and carves the tattoo into his forehead?
Right, and they kind of stole that from the movie.
Yeah, that's they definitely went movie route with that.
Yeah, I agree. That was an incredibly great scene.
I think it's one of my top 5 favorite moments in comic book history.
Yeah, I can see that.
They're both really good scenes, though. It's hard to pick between both of them, but this one I just remember like laughing out loud and just like pumping my fist reading this one.
Yeah.
Because Bullseye is the one who killed pretty much all of Daredevil's loved ones, Karen Page and Elektra. He definitely deserves to be killed, but Matt's never going to go that far. But he utterly humiliates him in front of this crowd who ends up showing up.
Right.
But I love that scene.
There are an awful lot of crowds that he beats up people in front of in the Bendis run.
It is New York City, so there are a lot of crowds all over the place.
Well, I guess that's true, but I did notice that there weren't a lot of solo fights. It was a lot of fights that took place with a lot of spectators and stuff.
Well, the whole Kingpin scene, that was kind of the point, I think.
Yeah.
Trying to make a point. But yeah, for the Bullseye one, they're kind of by themselves and people show up towards the end.
Right.
But those are probably my two favorite moments of the Bendis run that I can point to.
Right.
Do you have one that is different, Tim, or one of those two your favorites?
No, from an impact standpoint, those are probably it. I'm just trying to flip through real quick because I've read these numerous times, but I read them back most recently, back when we first started talking about doing this little chat. So I'm trying to think. As far as like impact goes, it's got to be those two fights with Bullseye and Kingpin. Although I think it's in volume 2 of the omnibus. He has that knockdown drag out with the Yakuza.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
That was pretty cool too.
is that whenever Spider-Man and Luke Cage show up in Iron Fist? Or is that later on in the book?
Well, so there's a couple different showdowns with the Yakuza, because one, they attack him in the rain, kind of interrupt another one of his dates with Mila, which seems to be kind of the ongoing thing. He and Mila can't have a date to save their lives because he's always getting attacked by somebody.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not finding it right off, but yeah, those are.
Dude, you had since January. What are you doing?
And it's Bendis. There's a lot of dialogue too.
Yeah.
a lot of word balloons.
Well, yeah, there are, but the thing is that I noted, and maybe it's just because I've read it so many times, it's a quick read. Like it's not. There's only one or two issues that feel like kind of dragged out, and there's one where it's mostly text. You've got kind of splash pages and you've got text down the sides, and that seemed to slow down a bit. But as far as his dialogue goes, it's not. I mean, there's a lot of dialogue, but it's not kind of like needless chatter, which seems to be. I don't know. I read some of his Ultimate Spider-Man, and it's not bad, and but that's a bunch of teenagers running around, and it just seemed like overly chatty. Like this never felt like that to me.
Yeah, it's not dense like Alan Moore panels. It's really quick and snappy. You don't need to read every single word. You can go pretty quick. Whereas someone like Alan Moore or Jess and I just finished up Justice by Alex Ross, and that was a really dense book. It took a long time to read. I think Bendis Daredevil goes by really quick.
Sorry, go ahead.
There's both Felix and Aiku say the support group arc is their favorite moment. The Daredevil support group thing.
I was just about to mention that was the one other thing that I had thought of, just kind of the reveal that he's been in the support group the entire time.
Yeah.
That was just sort of like, whoa. And then if you go back and look at earlier panels in that issue or in that arc even, you'll see kind of Matt off in the corner of a panel. He's not saying anything, nothing points him out, but you'll see the guy standing there like with the New York hat and the jacket and whatever. So like he's been seeded as throughout the arc as being in that group. And then they actually have the reveal, and it's just sort of like, oh wow. It's not just that they revealed that he was there. Like if you go back and look at previous panels, he's kind of off in the background. Let me see if
it has some gross out moments in that issue too, in those issues. I don't want to spoil that for anybody else.
Was that in book 2 or still in book 1?
I think
it's volume 2. It's volume 2. I think I'm finding it. It's issues 71 through whatever. It's the Decalogue arc.
Yeah, so that's volume 3 of my thick trades. That probably is volume 2 for your guys' Omnis.
Okay. And I forget, there's somebody in the support group that's been planted there to go after him, right? who is it in the support group that actually ends up attacking him?
I'm showing you. It's the Jester.
The Jester, okay.
Sorry for spoiling anything for anybody, but even if we're telling you some stuff, a lot of this stuff's already well known, and you won't lose your impact reading it anyway. I don't think.
Wait a week and a half until it's not fresh on the brain, and then start it, and you'll be fine.
Or if you're like Jess, you already forgot.
Yeah, that's what's great.
Wait, what?
Here's that gross out moment I was talking about.
Oh yeah. Oh, with the demon, yeah.
Yeah, it was disgusting.
Yeah, I think to me this is which is super enjoyable, even though Daredevil, as usual, gets beaten down and still comes back up. I think it's great the way that he keeps coming back up. As Felix said, that he's like from the boxer, he has the boxer mentality of never being able to be knocked down. I just really liked Bendis's his writing style. I love the art. I love the way it was set up. I loved all the panels. I mean, they were really cool. There was really cool panels and really effective use of color in this book. And I loved how throughout the whole run, you've got what's her name, Vanessa Fisk, to deal with. Even after Wilson Fisk is dealt with, Vanessa's still in the background, and you sort of forget about her through Brubaker's run. But then you pick, then she makes her presence known again.
There's a lot of interesting family drama with the course of these two runs, which I don't want to spoil for anybody.
We're going to spoil it. These things are, come on, man.
All right, sorry.
Old.
Vanessa Fisk is not to be trifled with. Let's just
say
that.
And they are super disappointed in their son, which they, kill him. So, yeah, Vanessa Fisk is extremely capable of doing her own thing without Wilson, and she has an agenda of her own that ends up getting settled in Brubaker's run. So we go from Bendis, who has at the very end, which I thought was kind of a revolutionary moment, where Daredevil actually ends up in prison on Rikers. Daredevil ends up in prison in a cell as Matt Murdock, and he's actually in jail. And that's how the Bendis issues end. And you're thinking, and he hands it off to Brubaker, and you're thinking, how is this going to resolve itself?
And it leads into my favorite story arc of Daredevil of all time with Brubaker's run, which is Devil in Cell Block D.
In jail, in the same cell block as Kingpin, Owl, Hammerhead, Bullseye.
All these guys put away. Yeah.
Yeah. Murderer's row of Daredevil villains. Oh, hey, you know what? We're just going to, basically the director of the FBI says, yeah, just throw them in there. They'll all kill each other. And then that's how the baton gets passed to Brubaker. And he's like, oh, hey, have fun with this.
I've heard Bendis say he wouldn't have done that if Brubaker wasn't okay with it. They talked about it before. He said, are you okay with me doing this? And Brubaker's like, that sounds awesome. I definitely want to hand off the baton in that way and take that and run with it. And I think he did a great job.
Yeah, I've heard Brubaker mention in multiple interviews that it was, they had decided that he was going to come on. Marvel had decided that he was going to be the one taking over the book, and they were at whatever the retreat was for that time frame. And Bendis kind of like off the cuff was all like, "Oh man, I would have just ended it with him going to jail." And Brubaker was like, "No, that would be great. That would be awesome. Let's do this." So then they kind of started, planning it that way, and it really turned out amazingly. But that's exactly why. Sometimes you'll hear a comment or a question from somebody like, oh, hey, I can't get my hands on such and such a book. Can I just read one of these runs without the other? And while I tend to be, in general, a big fan of just read whatever you're interested in, and then if it piques your curiosity, go back. These two arcs I'm very much like, you really need to read one before.
Yeah, you're right.
If you jump into Brubaker before Bendis, it's not gonna.
It'll
still be enjoyable.
It's not
but you're
going
gonna
to
miss
be the end of the
so much.
world, but you're not going to have the same context. I mean,
Right.
yeah, absolutely. You start with Brubaker, and he gives you all the information you need. You're brought up to speed. This is the situation. He's in jail. This is where we're going. But you're really missing out on the first half of the story if you start in the middle.
Right.
Bendis's run is Godfather 1, Brubaker is Godfather 2, and Shadowland is Godfather 3.
How long have you had that in the chamber, getting ready to use it?
20 seconds.
And as much of a proponent for Shadowland as I am, I don't know that I can argue with that analogy.
So we agree you can't really read Brubaker's run without reading Bendis's first. And
you could. I personally wouldn't recommend it.
No, I don't think any of us would.
It's like I just said, if you watch The Godfather 2 without watching part 1, you can still understand what's going on, but you're missing so much context, so much going on in the background, the Fredo-Michael relationship. You're just going to miss a lot.
Well, plus you're also you're missing a great movie, and you'd be missing a great couple of books here in Bendis's run. And there's no reason to do it with both of them being readily available now in a couple of formats now that you can read them together easily. So,
Brubaker Lark Volume 1 Omnibus is kind of sort of out of print.
What, already?
Mm-hmm.
When did he get put back in print?
A couple years ago.
Oh,
really? I think it was 2017 is when the Brubakers got reprinted.
Oh, all these complete collections are still around, though.
The complete collections are starting to become a little bit more difficult to find, but they're still.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's annoying. They should be evergreens.
And they may be, just from doing my little Daredevil collected reference spreadsheet thing on my blog. The Brubaker Lark Volume 1 Omnibus appears to be out of print again. Obviously the Bendis Malieve reprints just hit the beginning of the year.
Yeah.
Before the pandemic, those seem to be okay. It's been a little while since I've tried to do searches for updates, but the Omnibus Volume 1 for Brubaker might be a little bit difficult to get your hands on.
I love this hobby, but man, it can be a pain sometimes.
It really can.
I'll tell you, this whole pandemic situation is not making things any easier. I have a whole theory about, productions being halted and whatnot, and that eventually some of these things that are drying up so fast on IST and cheap graphic novels and other sort of websites may come back, but that's just a theory. I mean, there's who knows what's actually out there.
Yeah. So don't listen to me. Listen to Tim. He would definitely know a lot better. I had thought these were all in print, but maybe they're not.
I think the complete collections are there, and the other thing is all this is available digitally. As far as I know, it's all on Comixology.
And I really like these complete collections. They're really nice and thick. They look good on a shelf. They're a good option, even though if you can't get the omnibus.
I've actually almost bought those, reverse double dipped, just so I'd have loaners.
Well, I find them easier to read too. That's just my own personal.
Yeah.
I know you're. I remember seeing a post from you just a couple months ago, Tim, when you were doing your read through, and your first omnibus or second omnibus fell apart, and you had to glue it, didn't you?
So right before you jumped in, I was telling Jess, I said I was happy to find, a few months later that my glue job on my Bendis Volume 1 has held up. So. But yeah, mine was falling apart because I had gotten the original printing, and so it was at least 10 years old, and it's been reread many, many times. So
I love that you read it to pieces. That just makes me happy.
Yeah.
So Brubaker's run has not only you, Taylor, but Tyler Blunt's favorite Devil in Cell Block C or D? D.
Devil.
Right. What else about Brubaker's run makes it such a classic?
I just think that Brubaker is the master of noir, and that's what this run is. That's what this run is all about. I think him and Michael Lark are a great team coming off of Gotham Central. I think personally, I like Bendis's run a little bit better. It's really close. but I still do think that Devil in Cell Block D is my favorite arc. I think there are parts of Brubaker's run where it does stall out a bit, and it's a little bit too long in the tooth in some parts, but overall, there's a lot of interesting stories. I like how he goes back to a lot of 60s Silver Age villains like the Enforcers, Mr. Fear. I think he really ties back into a lot of villains which aren't touched upon very much or even aren't even touched upon at all in Bendis' run.
I also like somebody that we haven't talked too much about side characters, like Lady Bullseye gets introduced in this. I also like Dakota, the private investigator. I think she's really cool. There's a lot of good side characters in this book, besides the Mila that he falls in love with and can't seem to stay married to. I actually don't find Mila as interesting as Dakota, quite frankly.
He is more annoying than interesting for me.
Who is Mila?
Mia. I think they really do pound on her a lot throughout. Brubaker in particular pounds on her a lot. And I think she kind of turns into a whiny, always needing to be saved type of person. I wish she had a little bit more agency, kind of like Kirsten McDuffie does in the Wade run, his girlfriend in that run. She's the best. She's by far my favorite Daredevil love interest.
Yeah. Okay. So now that you mentioned that, I have to show you this if I can get my computer in front of it. This is my Chris Samney original, and it's Kirsten and Matt.
That's awesome.
Oh, that is awesome.
That's a commission, right?
Yeah, I got this from him last spring. Well, I booked it last spring, and I got it last fall because of his scheduling. But yeah, Kirsten's my absolute favorite love interest of Matt, like all time ever, hands down. Like, I get the importance of Karen Page, but as far as this is getting way off topic for Bendis and Brubaker, but
that's okay.
Wade's Kirsten, she just challenges him like in all of the ways all of his other love interests don't. So
yeah, Mia just becomes like a plot device punching bag at some point where it's just like, oh man, like and then whenever she ends up kind of going away in a certain way in a certain period of the book, I'm like, all right, I don't really. I mean, I felt sad, I felt bad for Matt, I felt bad for her, but at some point I was like, I'm just kind of tired of this character. I don't know if you guys felt the same way at all.
Yes.
Yeah.
She wasn't horrible or anything. She wasn't too bad, but at some points I was like, okay, I'm ready to move on.
No, she's very much a damsel in distress.
Right.
Which is actually kind of funny, only in that there's one scene where Gladiator physically throws her off a roof, and Matt goes diving after her to save her. And it's only funny, I guess, for me because that's an original page that I bought from Michael Lark. The page where he's jumping off the roof trying to save his then wife. But getting back to like what Jess was talking about, supporting characters, that's probably one of the two things that puts Brubaker's run over the top over Bendis's, in my personal opinion. They're both phenomenal. I'm not taking anything away from Bendis, but like if you gave me both of these arcs and said, or both of these runs and said, hey, this is the one that you've got to choose to read over and over from now until you die, I would choose Brubaker Lark. They flesh out the supporting characters in a lot more detail. And as far as like just the artwork goes, like Lark, I think draws Matt literally diving headlong into dangerous situations more than any other Daredevil artist I've ever seen. Like you just panel by panel, like he's literally diving head first, like every time he's going to go somewhere. And that just kind of really spoke to me as just part of the character, who he is, what he's all about, you know, man without fear. You're always jumping in head first, figuring it out afterwards.
Another character I liked was, and I forget his name, you guys will know his name, the old man that shows up.
Izo, I'm not really sure how they pronounce it, but yeah, he's fun.
I loved him. He was good, like comedy, dramedy relief, and I enjoyed his character a lot.
And he was kind of drunk all the time, right?
Yeah, and still able to whip up on everybody.
The side character award for me goes to Punisher, simply for this moment. He finds out there's a bunch of riots in Rikers. He reads the newspaper, walks across the street,
Yeah.
him beating up this woman. He breaks his neck in front of a cop and says, "I surrender. Take me away." So they take him to Riker so he can help Matt out.
So he can help Daredevil out. That was awesome.
That was probably my favorite moment of all of these runs.
Yeah.
Didn't even involve Matt.
I
and then
agree.
there's the part where they start the riot and Matt has to work with Kingpin and Bullseye's wielding double shotguns. That was awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
That was great. Frank basically getting himself sent to prison just so he could, saddle up to Matt in the lunchroom and say, "Hey, you're about 2 inches away from crossing the line that I cross every day. And I know that that's not what you're all about."
There's Bullseye wielding double shotguns, which is awesome. I don't know how he pumps them to reload, but it's still awesome.
Yeah.
That was so cool.
So we love these runs. They're both very different. I think with the introduction of Lady Bullseye and Brubaker's run, and the other female character whose name I'm blanking on, she just wears a mask. Who am I thinking of? She fights. Wait a sec.
Oh, is it White Tiger?
Yeah.
Yeah, because the White Tiger passes from the first guy to her.
Right.
I think it happens in Bendis' run, correct?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
Bendis has that trial. The trial
that's right,
arc where Hector Ayala, the previous White Tiger, gets mistakenly accused of a robbery and gets convicted and runs out of the courthouse and gets shot.
Right. I both had a different style, but both were extremely readable and exciting and interesting and compelling, with the addition of new characters and with Matt Murdock, going to the mat and still bouncing back up. I think these are God bless Frank Miller. I mean, you can't take away what he did with Daredevil, but these are my two favorite Daredevil books series so far.
I agree. And here's the question we need to ask ourselves: in which run does Matt get beat up the most in terms of emotionally, physically, spiritually? Which run is near to him? I think it's Brubaker by far.
Honestly, if it's between these two, it probably is Brubaker. Like, Bendis says, "Hey, I'm outing you," but Matt's pretty stand up through all that. I mean, as far as mentally and physically, he does the beating up. But in Brubaker's run, the dominoes start to fall and he starts to kind of lose it a little bit. Dealing with the situation with Mila and everything, and he definitely gets put through the ringer a little bit more during Brubaker's, I think.
So, is there anything else we need to talk about the greatness of these two series? We urge everybody out there in whatever format you can to pick them up. They were revolutionary. They transformed Daredevil. They changed the characters around Daredevil. They turned the trope of secret identity upside down on its head by unmasking him and having him deal with the after effects and whether or not he was having a nervous breakdown from Karen Page's death. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of the onion layers that get peeled back to get down to what's going on with Matt. It's just not that he's getting beaten up physically, but he gets beaten up emotionally a lot too. So is there anything else we can say about it other than that?
In terms of my top 5 favorite comic book runs, these are 2 of them. So that's
2 out of 5.
Yeah, that's a pretty big ringing endorsement for me. Especially if I'm talking about Marvel. I think in general, Marvel has better runs, whereas DC has better standalone books, like evergreen books.
I would agree.
Marvel doesn't have many of those evergreen standalone solo books, where Marvel's more based on runs. In terms of Marvel runs, this is 2 of my top 5.
Right.
Well, I mean, Daredevil's my all-time favorite character, but these are definitely, this era is absolute at the top. people ask me, what are your favorite runs? And these two are always right there, but I always have to throw out Miller, and then Wade's way up there too. And that can get into a whole nother conversation, and I know that's not what we're here for tonight, but these two are definitely right at the very top as far as I'm concerned.
If Zdarsky keeps going the way that he is, he could definitely crack in the top 5 or top 3 for me.
I absolutely loved his first arc, and I was, people were like, oh, what do you think? And I'm like, oh, I'm kind of waiting and seeing, but I mean, he's 20 issues in now, and I'm feeling pretty confident in saying that, he'd have to really drop the ball for his not to end up being, up there with the rest of them.
Okay. Eric W has a good question.
Who does?
Eric W about the Frank Miller Daredevil.
Okay, just a sec. There you go.
Just reading Frank Miller's Daredevil. Can I go from Frank Miller to Bendis Daredevil, or something I need to read before?
I did that.
You did that? Absolutely.
Frank Miller
I think that's the way a lot of people do it, to be perfectly honest. Now, being the Daredevil fan I am, is some stuff in between that I would recommend being read, but like chronologically or continuity wise, it's nothing super duper important. You could make that jump from Miller to Bendis.
I would say go from Miller to Guardian Devil and then go to Bendis. I think that death of Karen Page is really important to read, even though I think the rest of the story isn't.
That's a good.
The rest of the story isn't essential. It's just that moment that's really important to Daredevil's history. He's never come back.
I totally agree. And that Kevin Smith run is only 8 issues, and then there's 4 or 5 that were written by David Mack right after it. That was also very good. So people will ask about that, and we're just like, well, if you're going to start with Bendis, you might as well start at Guardian Devil because you're only adding a dozen issues.
Because Bendis' run does start really interesting with Kingpin being blind and some other things going on. It's like you kind of are thrown in. Like, I don't know exactly what's going on here, but I just pull a Jess and go, I accept it. It's just comics. So you can pull a Jess and do that.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly right.
So I think that's all I have to say. And Ephraim and Navarro, I agree. I'm still waiting for a Soul Omnibus or at least thick trades. I'm really hoping they come out with some hardcovers of that. And I'm really hoping that Marvel announces hardcovers for Chip Zdarsky's run. They're really focusing a lot on Donny Cates' books, which I think is great. I love all of his books, but I would love to see some Chip Zdarsky Daredevil hardcovers getting announced and solicited from Marvel. And I'm pretty sure Tim's frozen.
Oh, he is?
Hopefully he'll jump back in, but I think we're towards the end anyway.
Yeah, I think we're both pretty close to being done. Taylor, thank you for joining me and setting this up and encouraging me to read these.
Of course, I'm glad it finally worked out.
Yeah, I'm glad that we finally got a chance to do it. And let's see if Tim gets back on. Okay, there he is.
Is it coming back?
Yeah, you're okay. And Tim, thank you for joining us. We had a good time talking to you about Daredevil. This was great. It finally happened. And
I appreciate it. Thanks for reaching out and letting me tag along and whatnot. It was a lot of fun. I'm glad we were able to do it.
Yeah, this was great. And I appreciate everybody in the chat, and I appreciate everybody watching this afterwards. Please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. We always answer comments, and this was great. Thank you very much for tuning in. Peace and love. Peace and love.
See you guys.